Hi, how are you doing? There's going to be three topics covered in this video. One is a history of Gas City Transfer Company. Another topic is going to be about a new trucking company I discovered. And then I have some thoughts about this channel and how it relates to YouTube. It's going to be interesting, so stick with me, okay? Watch to the end. That's what my subscribers do. Speaking of subscribers, now I know I have a lot of great subscribers on this channel, and they let me know what they think. There's one that loves the content. He doesn't get enough of my videos. He wants more videos. Well, okay, here's another one. This is for you. Okay? But I was in, no joking aside, I love my subscribers. I love the comments. I read them all. I respond to as many as I can. But I don't want it to go to my head that this is the kind of content that you guys thrive on. Now, it is true. It is very true. You cannot get, I haven't seen it, the kind of content that this channel provides anywhere else on YouTube. And let me give you an example. Yes, I have notes. Okay. On this channel, I've done, I don't know, 250 to 260 videos so far. Somewhere in that range. I could look it up, but I don't want to spend the time counting. In the past, since August of 2025, this is the type of content that you have seen on this channel. I have done company histories on trucking companies, and it's quite a long list. The companies I've done histories of are Branch Motor Express, Briggs Transportation, Cooper Jarrett, Portland Albany Truck Line, Consolidated Freight Company, Barnwell Brothers, Western Gillette, Acme Freight Lines, Harrison Dispatch Company, Atlantic Motor Express, B&L Motor Freight, Associated Transport, Transport Motor Express, and my latest one was Gross Common Carrier. Some of the other topics I've covered extensive histories and profiles of truck terminals, more specifically the early multi-tenant truck terminals where, okay, let me explain that to you people who haven't seen that video or any of them or are new to this channel. Back in the early history of trucking, common carriers, back in the 30s and 40s, and sometimes earlier than that. But when trucking companies were very small and perhaps they didn't have the resources to have their own terminals because the industry was so young, a company would come and build a truck terminal of rather large size for the day, 20, 30 doors. Indianapolis had 60 doors, and one in Chicago had more than 100. But anyway, they'd open up these truck terminals, and the trucking companies could rent however number of doors they required for their operation. And some of the videos I've done on those particular truck terminals, I did one on the 400 block of South Alameda Street in LA. I did one on the Indiana Motor Freight Terminal. That's the one in Indianapolis I referred to. The one in Chicago at 3333 South Iron Street. I did one on the Union Motor Freight Terminals. I did more recent terminals. I did an expose on the trucking terminals in Long Island, New York in 1974. And one of my favorite ones to do was a look at the history of trucking terminals in Greensboro, North Carolina. That's where I grew up. Now, most people wouldn't have thought that Greensboro, a medium-sized city, would have a rich history of truck terminals, but they do. And if you don't believe me, go look at that video. I've also talked a lot about how trucking was during World War II with the Office of Defense Transportation taking over trucking companies, the rationing of tires and parts and gasoline and diesel fuel during World War II. I've talked about that a lot. I've also talked about how certain states have regulated or started regulating the motor carriers long before the ICC ever got involved. I talked a lot about that with the state of Iowa. So, and also some of the other things I've talked about. Recently, I did a video on Giflox dollies. I have done several videos where I show just pictures with music of carriers like Old Dominion, Roadway, Consolidated Freightways, PIE. I did one on Spectre, Branch Motor Express, McLean, Overnight. They're well received. You guys love seeing truck pictures, but you also love hearing about companies you've never heard of, and that's my specialty. Now, when I present a video on this channel, and I've talked about this before too, I do my own research. I do not use AI. Now, I have been known in the past to experiment with the thumbnails that you see when you're trying to select what video you want to see. I have asked AI's help on thumbnails, but my research and my content that I report on is all researched by me. In fact, I've done a video or two on how I caught the AI in inaccurate information. I've done 2 videos like that. So, I do my own research to bring you the best content that you have come to expect. And what research materials do I use? I use a multitude of things. I don't want to give my sources away, but some sources I have to pay for. So I do the research for you so you don't have to spend your money, okay? That's why I monetize this channel, so that the money I make can go toward paying the subscription for some of the sites that I use in my research. And those sites are definitely legit. Excuse me, I need some coffee. I love my coffee. And yes, this is an AirAsia coffee mug. I'm also into airlines, okay? Sue me. One of these days, I may just start a channel on airline history. Now, I've thought about doing a video channel on YouTube about railroad history, and I know several of you are railroad buffs. I'm still trying to decide if I want to delve into that, because it would be similar to what I do here. History of small unknown railroads, perhaps. There's so much with railroads that you guys probably already know that I don't want to repeat what you already know. I want to provide information that you don't know. It's an educational channel, okay? You're learning about trucking history. So, all right, let's get into Gas City Transfer. I've rambled on about everything else, so let's get into the gist of it. Okay, now about this history of Gas City transfer. I want to introduce you to a man named Walter J. Lowe, who was living in Orlando, Florida in 1952. On August 16th, the Internal Revenue Service opened up files to show the reasons that it gave in its 1949 records for settling a $1.4 million tax case for only $65,000. Okay, so here's the gist of what was happening. Walter J. Lowe owed the Internal Revenue Service $1.4 million. He settled for only $65,000 in 1949. It took 3 years until 1952 for the IRS to release the file. And this is why. The case was against Walter Lowe. In 1952, Lowe was retired and without income except some rental property. He formerly lived at Gas City, Indiana, where he headed a trucking firm called Gas City Transfer Company. Ta-da! I'll get to that. It seems that according to the IRS 1949 files, the $65,000 accepted from Lowe appeared to be as much as could be collected from the sale of Lowe's assets. The summary of the case said that there was substantial doubt as to the liability of Lowe for the taxes, penalties, and interest against him. So, that's all I'm going to say about that. But, okay, he was head of a company called Gas City Transfer Company. Who were they? Where were they operating in? How big were they? You know the stand. Okay. Then I found something from October of 1944. Now, I don't usually like going backwards in history, but this is just the way it turned out. It was news in October 1944 that Marion Trucking Company Incorporated had acquired Jaqua Transit Company of Muncie, Indiana, and Harwood Trucking Company of Marion, Indiana. It mentioned that Harwood Trucking had acquired Gas City Transfer Company several years before and would be keeping some of its equipment and would retain operating on an intrastate basis. So, Marion Trucking Company bought Harwood Trucking, and they were going to sell only their interstate rights and some of the equipment, but they were going to keep the local stuff. But it still didn't tell me what size of a company Gas City Transfer was. So I had to keep digging, and of course I had to go backwards some more. Okay. There was a classified for sale ad in a newspaper from a year earlier. In December 1943, Gas City had equipment in service, but listed it for sale, including 30 medium and heavy-duty tractors, 35 trailers, and 2 straight trucks. Bingo! Now we know how big of a fleet they had. I love it. But I'm still not satisfied yet. So I checked another source. Now, some of you may have heard about this. I don't know. Some of you may not. Did you know that there are printed volumes of the motor carrier cases brought before the Interstate Commerce Commission from 1936 to 1982, something like that? It started in 1936 for a very special reason. Now, we all know that the Motor Carrier Act started in 1935, and that's what got the ICC to regulate motor carriers. But they had to get things set up. They had to get the what they call joint boards together, which were the local the local hearings that the ICC had. Let's say I had a trucking company in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I needed to get authority. Okay, I didn't have to go to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. had all these little groups nationwide that would come to the individual localities and hear your case. I did a video on that. There was a little town, Coquille, Oregon, that there was quite a few applicants that had to go before the local board. And Seaford, Delaware, I did a video on, there was about 11 or 12 applicants just from this little town of Seaford, Delaware, that all of a sudden at the same time were submitting applications for authority to the ICC. And in that video, the first one was granted. All the other ones were denied. All the other ones had the same lawyer as the first one. So you would think that by the time the second or third one got denied, they all would have been saying, hey, get rid of this lawyer. We don't want him. We're not winning our cases. But that's the way it was. Okay, back to the ICC. So in early 1939, Gas City Transfer appeared in Volume 11 of the Interstate Commerce Commission Motor Carrier Cases Volume 11. Okay, and here's what I found out. The ICC had granted Gas City Transfer Company docket number MC8540. And there was a period of time in early 1939 where they were adding to their authority. I've covered this before. Each time you add to your original certificate, it's called a sub number. Okay. All right. So here's what happened. Sub number 3. Approved on February 28th, 1939 to haul fertilizer from Louisville, Kentucky to points in Indiana. Okay, multi-state operation. Sub number 4, effective February 27th, 1939. They were denied an application as a common carrier of meat scraps from East St. Louis, Illinois to Carmel, Indiana. Sub number 7. They were granted authority to haul preserved fruits and liquid extracts from Cincinnati, Ohio to Fort Wayne and Richmond, Indiana. So, we've already seen that they are operating in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio. Okay, sub number 9. They were denied the ability to haul empty oil drums from points in Indiana to Lawrenceville, Illinois. But sub number 10, they were granted to haul hand trucks, empty cans, and can covers from between points in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. And sub number 11, they were authorized to haul pig iron from Hamilton, Ohio to Upland, Indiana. I didn't know what pig iron was, but it's something used in steel making. And remember, these were commodities from 1939, not necessarily what people would haul now. Now it would be just lumped together under general commodities. Okay, enough about Gas City Transfer. And I've covered what we have covered in previous videos. Oh yeah, one more thing I wanted to talk about. You know, sometimes in my research, I come across small penny stocks that are connected with the trucking industry. I talked about one a few weeks ago. I think it was called Black Diamond Resources, and they owned a trucking company that was devoted to oil fields, stuff like that. But hey, This is not recommending stocks, okay? This is just information, okay? If you choose to invest, it's at your own risk. But anyway, I found a company called Rubicon Technology Incorporated, stock symbol RBCN. It trades at $4 a share, so some people may call it a penny stock, some people won't. But anyway, total assets of the company is $88,875. They do have revenue, and they're making money. Their revenue, all from logistics, is for the quarter that ended March 31st of this year, was $51,484. And they made, after all the expenses, they made $2,960. What do they do? From what I gather, they're a brokerage, because of the $51,484 in revenues, $21,000 came from trucking brokerage, $12,500 from ocean freight, $11,344 from customs brokerage, I guess going across to Canada or whatever, and air freight revenues for brokerage was $6,339. Just information, just another company connected with trucking that I found that I thought y'all might like to hear about. So, that's it for this one. As usual, leave comments, give me a thumbs up, and we'll see you in the next one.